Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Practical Principles, Practical Prince. Today we're going to talk a little on philosophy and try to figure out what is right and how we might use that then to guide what we do. Touching on last time real quick, talked about the relationship between the body and the spirit, and I refer to it as symbiotic, which sort of implies there's choice there. And as far as I can tell, the body doesn't really have a choice. So it might be more appropriate to view the body as a tool rather than, well, as something more distinct and separate. It's not a tool you can choose not to use, well, more or less. But yeah, so going on with right, the first source of right that might come to mind would be your conscious. For Christians, that would be the light of Christ. I'm not sure what that would be in other faiths and whatnot. What we do know about that, though, is it's not like an always-on thing. Sometimes you'll make choices, and it's a flat line. You've got no signal from that, no impression. And other times you'll get something weak. Sometimes you might get something strong, even very specific. So what we're getting from that is there isn't like an infinite series of right actions, because we talked about how perfection isn't really a state. It is something you do. It's wholeness is the better translation from the Bible, everything like that. So you don't I can't speak for Christ, but I don't think he just constantly had conscience always on telling him exactly what to do and then did it. That's certainly not my experience. It's probably not your experience either. Which makes some sense, because if there was a signal that was just 100% good and 100% on, why do we need this spirit to make choices? You could just lean on that and let that run your life on autopilot, so to speak. So that's a source of right for some people, I guess, but it certainly doesn't cover all the scenarios you could run into. And that might speak to how not every decision you make has a right or wrong. You'll probably hear about catch-22s or better versus best, situations where there's two good things or two bad things, and it's just the degree of good or bad that you're really picking between. Yeah. I'm going to go on and say that in those cases, there is a better thing, but sometimes it's really just how you evaluate them. Like the good of the many or the good of the few. There could be pros or cons depending on the situation. When you add more context, that could change how right or wrong that is. And context is a funny thing. Like, for example, I don't know how far away the place is, but there's a place where you can go and throw axes near where I live. And obviously, if I'm throwing an axe and hitting bullseye target or missing it, regardless. That's not right or wrong morally. I mean, you could judge the skill based off of how accurate the bullseye was, but the bigger picture of a person throwing axe, there's nothing particularly right or wrong there. But then if you throw an axe at a person, is that suddenly wrong? What if they're attacking you? Is that suddenly right? So context has a good deal to do with that, which is interesting because then there's the issue of, are we perceiving the context, perceiving the situation accurately? And we already talked about how we have a funny sense, not funny, fuzzy sense of reality, and that you can skew your perception and whatnot. So there's the context, and I should probably take notes. Let me go ahead and I don't know if we want that. Yeah, well, that's fine. And let's just throw some notes. So don't need bullets, I just want context. And prior to that, we talked about conscious. And can we see that? No, we cannot. Let me shift that here. I'll just drag all the words, I guess. Is that better? Yes, that is much better. Okay. Then get back getting in there. So there's the conscious as a source. It's not always on. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from that. Then we got to context. And I think probably one of the bigger things there is intent. Because if someone is trying to kill me, but I am not aware of that at all, and I throw an axe at them, my intent obviously is in self-defense because I'm not even aware I'm in danger. So really, the intent is probably the key there. And I suppose along with the not always on is the well, I guess we don't know if every single action has a right or wrong, because we still need to establish where that could come from. We've got our notes so far. So let's go back to talking about the body. Because we've established that you've got this body, that you've got a relationship with it, and that there's some back and forth, give and take. So when you're hungry, when you get that signal, and then eventually feed yourself, is that a right thing or a wrong thing? And how much do our other notes play into that? we've already got the not always on, and I'm pretty sure most people will agree that when you feed yourself, um, like obviously there's the threshold of dying, and there's the threshold of already well fed, don't need food. But in between, there's a certain area where it would be good to eat. But it doesn't have to be a particular instant in time. It's not like clockwork. So I guess that signal just adds a to-do. Of course, not all signals are good. My brother-in-law works at a hospital, and I don't remember when this was, but he was dealing with patients at one point where the law said that if the patient wanted water, you had to give them water. And you might think that's silly, but what these people had done is that they were like hyper thirsty, I guess. They would drink water they didn't need and were slowly drowning themselves. But because of the law, they couldn't deny them the water. So I think what they did is they had them sign a waiver or something like, it's your choice that you're drowning yourself, basically, is what that amounts to. So there's that certain, and maybe that has to deal with more so the fuzziness issue. So we've got the body, we've got the hunger example and the thirsty example. And I should probably just shorten this to what? Misaligned. We've got that misaligned example. And maybe it's really just the person with that give and take has abused it in a sense, has abused the tool. Sort of like, what would be a good example? Like an old shovel with a wooden handle. When you get it, it was probably smooth and or polished, but over time it might wear and eventually start getting splinters. Could be in that sort of issue where it's gone out of whack and they should really address it, but they don't, and so they continue to use it and suffer for using it. Okay. But is this getting us any closer to right and subsequently wrong? So back to the simple example of hunger, feeding yourself. Is there something right or wrong there, potentially? I mean, assuming that you've got a good understanding, that your context, your understanding is sound, like it's probably good to take care of your body. Does that make it right? Because now I'm thinking of cases where people fast because they've got another reason. And so basically they go hungry on purpose. Hungry on purpose. So they're ignoring the body. And sometimes that's going to be like medically requested, like they'll need it for an operation or something. So there again, we're getting back to context and intent. Okay. I'm just going to throw out that I listened to a fair amount of Jordan Peterson. And something coming to mind there is the idea that pain is undesirable. Because in the case of the fasting for the surgery, that's to presumably reduce pain. Obviously, stuff can go wrong in surgery, but that's where we get intent as well. So nothing went. So the intention is good. Then the outcome could still be bad. And is there something wrong there? You starve yourself for a surgery to reduce your suffering, and instead, for whatever reason, it increases or stays the same, which yeah, that amounts to about the same thing, because it's compared to the goal of pain being reduced. Okay. Intent seems to be pretty key here in all the examples we've talked about. And we've talked about how it can flip-flop based off of adding more and implying more intent, like in the axe throwing example. Okay. So is pain wrong? Because most doctors, at least in my recent experience, I think, or health people or whatever, most refer to pain as sort of like a signal your body talking to you, telling you that something is wrong. I mean, hunger is a form of pain. Because you've got a form of pain there. So pain would right or wrong come down to whether or not you intend to decrease or increase pain. I'm trying to think, is there an opposite to pain? Because there's like joy, happiness, ecstatic, ecstasy, not a drug. Or are those truly opposites? Because a lot of people would say happy versus sad, happy versus mad. Is it more of a, is it even a spectrum, or are they just different dimensions? I'm leaning towards different dimensions. Because you can, like, there's the concept of mixed feelings. Like, parents and their daughter getting married and moving away to live with their new son-in-law. Like, they can be happy about their daughter finding the love of her life and whatnot, and progressing in that regard. And they can be sad about her departure from their life. Not that it's like death or anything, but presumably there will be a big difference in that example. Because if there were a complement to pain, something on the opposite side of it, I guess it would still be, it would just be the gradient of whatever that spectrum is. But in this case, I think that's fine to just refer to pain as one thing. It's sort of like temperature. Like, we think of hot and cold, but really it's the presence or absence of energy. Hotter it is, the more energy there is in that system. Cooler it is, the less, until you get to no energy. Which makes me straight thought. So I think I'm okay with that statement on pain. But now, is pain wrong? Because, like, you may have heard about how sometimes doctors have to, like, break a bone again in order to reset it and fix it so that it is correct. Stuff like that, where pain is inflicted to prevent more pain later. So is the or to phrase it the other way, is lessening pain. Let's see. How can we toy with that? because we've already looked at the doctor example, and so there's an aspect of time, um, sacrificing some pain now for less pain later. Running a little short on space, so let's go ahead and let me go up a little more. Okay, it's the same color. Can you even see? Yes, you can see it. Okay. So we got the rest of that height. So is murder, for example, let's say it's a quick, painless death, they didn't feel anything. Would murder be wrong in this case? Because I am, like, there's the fact that that person has connections, and that by removing that person, you're causing pain for people connected to them. So then let's isolate that person. Let's say I guess let's just go with a caveman. Neanderthal, whatever, living by themselves. And then our perpetrator goes, painlessly kills them. Is something, I mean, I think most people think murder is wrong. So is this too simple with the pain? Because the caveman obviously has an impact on the ecosystem, for better or worse, and to more or less extent. And we can talk about a modern day hermit. Is there anything and just presume nature goes on, absorbs whatever they had, or somebody else comes along and claims it, and just never knows about murder? I think we still consider that murder wrong. So while this seems good, I don't think that's where we're going to get right from. But let's see what we can glean from this. So what from that murder could we then say is wrong? Is it the fact that it's killing something else? Because I mean, people have killed animals before to eat and to live. I don't think we would consider that wrong. So then does it come to the sentience? That you kill another conscious thing? Because it's not you killing your own. Like there are some creatures where they eat their mates and stuff like that. Some spiders, I can't remember the precise breed. So like that sort of cannibalism. I don't think um, so. I think we would just chalk that up to nature, basically. That they were built that way. There's nothing wrong with them being that way. So then we don't necessarily want to mimic nature's laws. Um, so that's not exactly what we want. Because I think we could look at nature, for example, or for examples of how things are, but we wouldn't want to emulate that, for example. But why not? What makes that wrong? Because we could talk about throw two spiders into, well, I don't think we really could consider spiders as doing wrong. Do we really consider any creature, well, humans aside, as capable of doing wrong? I mean, if the dog pees on your carpet, it's wrong because you've decided it's so, right? That you want carpet clean and you don't want it to get unnecessarily dirty. So I don't think nature, as an example, is going to be particularly useful. So we've got the listening pain, natural law. We have the conscious example at the top. Um, and I almost want to say that that definitively would tell you right and wrong. Like, it must be clear we're talking about moral right and wrong, because you can arbitrarily decide the rules and whatnot and create right and wrong that way. But without that, where would right come from? Because that's what we'll end up building on if we want to, I guess, later on. Um, but I feel like we would. I mean, that's basically what societies do. So, can we capture the essence of this core? it's conscience, there's not something necessarily wrong with that. I guess it's just hard to externalize. Would that be the key there? Because with conscious, each person has their own, and it might not. I guess we just don't know much about conscious. Does everybody have a similar conscious? Does it react the same way? Well, I think we can say that it reacts similarly. I guess is that beat that it gives you how it's. Well, I guess the how isn't too important. Ultimately, does it communicate the same things about right and wrong? And maybe it does, although that's going to be hard for a society to build off of, because it's not like we have access to each other's conscience. So there's an issue with scale there, but that's more of an issue when we get to people in society and interacting with others. So I want to do tentative, yes. I don't know if we can do better. Let's see. What else do we? So setting aside conscience. We've got the lesson of pain. We've got natural law. I guess the appealing thing about natural laws is the constancy. That by abiding by those rules, that what is okay to be. Like if you believe in a devil, you believe that he does evil, but the fact that he exists, isn't inherently wrong. His existence isn't a bad thing, because he does exist. I mean, just anything that does exist, I don't think you would say it's wrong, because it exists under the rules that we all exist under. But then what they choose to do, that is. So do we require choice? I mean, does choice really change the spider cannibalism? Do we consider animals as having choice? Are we running off the screen there? Yeah, we are. Yeah, I'm using Restream to send this out. Just talking through, discussing right and how we might determine that and where that comes from. So, and these are just some notes we have on it. and just thinking through that. Sorry, I should probably look into something to notify me when there's comments. But yeah, and yeah, I use Restream because then I can stream in one spot and have it go multiple places. So back to philosophy and talking about, right. Because tentatively we've got the conscience. Is choice essential? Do animals have joints? Choice with the spider example. Or do they not? In which case are those, do we consider animals to be just highly complex tools, essentially? Because with conscience, like, I mean, all the stuff we're developing here is in the context of a single person, and we're assuming that that's going to apply to other people. But then, what counts as another person? What is the logic behind that equality? Because, like, dolphins are, they've done studies on dolphins, and those are pretty intelligent, but are those equals with us? If so, why? If not, why? I don't think we consider them equals, but why or why not? That's the tricky part there. And then where do we go from that? Now I'm thinking, would a dolphin have a conscience? And if it did, how would we know? I'm not sure we could. So there's an issue with language barriers, potentially. That would be kind of awkward. Figuring out language to talk to a society and then finding out they don't have a conscience. Does that then make them animals? And yeah, that would be strange and weird. So, but I guess, along those lines, let's focus back down to the individual. And where can we go with that? Let's take suicide. Removes other people from the equation. Is there something inherently wrong there or right? I mean, we talked previously about body and that coexistence and whatnot. I'm not pro-suicide by any means, but I can understand the logic that would lead people to those sorts of actions. What do you think that is wrong? Person detached from society kills themselves. Is there something wrong there? I feel like it's wrong, Cypress my conscious, so because we could also do it in a way that is painless. Speaking to that point, it wouldn't be natural. So there's that. I think maybe there's an example of animals that commit suicide. Let's take a brief. And we have a whole Wikipedia on animal suicide. Can you believe it? Suicide in the defense of the group could be instantaneous or altruistic self-removal. Once an animal becomes deceased, some parasites manipulate and lungs. Yeah, there's, I think mine is where you get the groupthink sort of ideas. Yeah, let's see. Self-destruction. Yeah, it's usually for the greater good is what these animals are doing. They're sick or infected or something, and so they isolate themselves and then end up killing themselves in some way. Brings up wasps and bees and how it's a suicide attack in some instances based on the breed. And I don't think anybody considers a bee trying to sting what it perceives as a predator wrong. So yeah, I think tentatively we'll go with conscience as that source of right. But then we've still got to figure out, because we talked about how it doesn't go for time. It's not an always on thing. So with the rest of the actions, does it just not matter? And maybe that's really what the case is. There's just that slack there. Okay, yeah. Let's go with conscience for now. Let's figure out what our next topic would be. I'm kind of inclined to go over the world. And yeah, let's go over world and the external reality, and more so on how useless relativism is. Because I don't think like that position just undermines itself, and hopefully I'll be able to articulate it well next time. But well, we'll see how it goes. These are meandering discussions, trying to figure these topics out. So it is what it is. I was thinking of testing the mic that I got today, the sound setup, but It's been charging for quite some time and won't power on. So I think the battery just needs to sit for a while. So I'll try testing that offline. Friday, again at 2 MST. I don't know your time zone. We'll do talk and tarot. So if you have questions, we can talk about them, and if you want, we can flip cards and tell them.